This is a common theme for many experienced actors. They know that acting can only take them so far, so they want to explore the producing side of television life. Producing is a whole different challenge, mundane at times and tedious, also wonderfully rewarding when it all comes together. Plus, as an actor and producer, he would have some control over the many decisions that would affect his career, control over stories, co-stars, and guest stars. We arrived at a solution. David would become a full partner in Baywatch, our fourth executive producer along with Michael Burke, Doug Schwartz, and myself. Ultimately, this proved to be an exceptionally profitable move by Hasselhoff, and it was good for the show. By being vested in its success, Hasselhoff over the years proved to be a wonderful promoter of the show. The British television market is huge and very competitive. Because of the market's importance, Paul Talbot decided that our British station, ITV, should deal directly with me, same as Beta Taurus. At the time, England had only a few stations, BBC One, BBC Two, and ITV. Unlike American television, Britain has strict rules preventing excessive sex and violence before 9 p.m. in the evening. But at the stroke of 9 p.m., which is called the watershed, everything changes. After the watershed, almost anything can be shown on British television, including programs that are far more graphic than those on our own networks. During the NBC year, ITV broadcast Baywatch after the watershed, paying only $25,000 an episode, which is practically nothing considering the show cost $1.3 million to make. For that one season, the show achieved decent ratings in England. For the new Baywatch, ITV offered to pay us $75,000 an episode as a license fee and another $75,000 as an equity fee, from which they could derive a profit if the show did well. Their $150,000 total was included in Paul Talbot's $400,000 total for Europe. But ITV would pay that huge amount if and only if we made a show that would work before the watershed. That was the key. Warren Breach, our main contact at ITV, said, "Here's our stipulation. We don't want you to put women or children into violent situations." It's a great system once you learn it. No knives, no guns, no rape, no violence against women or children specifically, no physical harm being done to them by another person. Now, we could show a woman in danger or drowning, otherwise we wouldn't have much of a show, but we couldn't show a woman being physically attacked by a guy. Early on in syndication, we made an episode called The One That Got Away, in which a fisherman stalked a woman lifeguard. Ultimately, he trapped her under a pier, and it looked as if he was going to rape her. ITV hated it. I flew to London with a copy of the show and met with the ITV people. We sat in their editing booth and started cutting away at the offensive scenes, which put pressure on them as well. They were forced to demonstrate exactly how they wanted the episode to look. Not only did it solve the problem, it helped establish a good working relationship. I was the first American producer to fly in and try to solve a problem rather than simply shoving it back in their face. ITV agreed to put us on at 5:45 on Sunday night. To the Brits, 5:45 is a very round number. Some of their shows start at 6:17 or 8:39. The British networks either don't show commercials, or if they have commercials, they block them together, showing them only for 20 minutes non-stop before or after a program. In the UK, Sunday night at 5:45 is the time to air. Anything that aired in that time slot would earn good numbers. It gets dark early in England, rugby stops, they eat dinner ridiculously early, everything leads into it. Sunday nights at 5:45 was the best time in the week, and ITV was the best channel. Herein lies the secret to Baywatch's runaway, worldwide, ongoing success. By adhering to ITV's rules, we made a show that appealed to a broad range of viewers. It could play in any time slot, on any day, anywhere in the world. For station programmers, Baywatch was a dream come true. Suddenly we could sell the new Baywatch to China, Spain, Brazil, Russia, Japan, Iceland, South Africa, South America, eventually 145 countries around the world. In the big picture, the audience is broken into three groups: kids, middle-aged adults, and older adults. In any of these 145 countries, all three generations, daughter, mother, and grandmother, could watch an episode together and not be embarrassed at any point. You could count on it. Little did we know that a global audience was hungry for Baywatch. Once we found out, we made it our job to satisfy that hunger. Thanks to Paul Talbot, we had our international distribution under control. Plus, we were halfway toward acquiring the $18 million we needed to make the series. Gaining domestic distribution and finding the remaining $9 million proved to be a lot more challenging. At first, we explored the possibility of getting the new Baywatch on an established network. We were turned down by ABC and CBS. Next, we explored getting Baywatch on a budding network, which at the time consisted of only a Fox. They were not interested. We then tried placing Baywatch on Lifetime Television, USA, TNT, even the Playboy channel. Although they all agreed in principle to air Baywatch, eventually we concluded that their viewership was simply too small to support a relatively expensive production. The best place for Baywatch, we decided, would be on the independent stations around the country. Los Angeles is a good example. In Los Angeles at the time, Channel 13, owned by United and Chris Kraft, promoted itself as the very independent Channel 13. Chris Kraft wanted first-run quality programming to compete against the established networks. In order to sell Baywatch to independent stations such as Chris Kraft, we teamed up with a small distribution company called LBS, run by twin brothers Paul and Henry Siegel. Thanks to LBS, we were introduced to United and Chris Kraft. And not only did Chris Kraft own Channel 13, they owned stations in 6 other major markets: New York, Chicago, Portland, Phoenix, San Francisco, and Minneapolis. This made Chris Kraft the largest distributor of independent programming in the country. The man in charge at Chris Kraft, Evan Thompson, turned out to be exactly the sort of executive with whom I prefer to deal. He didn't pretend to be a programming expert, always intruding on the creative side of the business. Evan Thompson made his decisions based on the rating numbers. If a show rated well and the cost was reasonable, he wanted it. After a few brief meetings, Chris Kraft became partners in Baywatch. In exchange for 6% ownership of the show, Chris Kraft agreed to give Baywatch good time slots on all of their stations and to promote the show. This promotion was absolutely essential, as important as getting the show on the air in the first place. When considering all the pieces that were into remaking Baywatch, the smartest single thing we did was to join forces with Chris Kraft. Thanks to Chris Kraft, we now had a healthy start on domestic distribution. Now we directed our energy toward finding the missing financing, $9 million. Where does one find $9 million for a speculative project that doesn't promise any sort of return? Perhaps LBS. When we were first partnered with LBS, they told us they had access to loans, which was one reason we were excited to work with them. Wrong. Unfortunately, we soon learned that LBS, despite the fact that Henry Siegel was a certified genius, had a terrible credit rating among the banks. In truth, LBS was quite close to going bankrupt. While I was counting on LBS to be our financial and distribution partner, they were counting on Baywatch to be their savior. We considered going straight to a bank ourselves. Plenty of banks in Southern California lend money on speculative projects, but banks need collateral. If we wanted to put our house on the line, our parents' houses, our cars, basically everything we owned, we might have acquired a loan. But if Baywatch failed, we would lose it all, something none of us could afford to do. We had 2 more options: a sponsor or a guarantor. First, I looked into getting a long-term sponsor, such as Coca-Cola or Procter & Gamble. In the early days of television, a solitary company owned a whole TV show, such as Texaco Star Theater, but the Hallmark Hall of Fame is one of a few remaining examples of this. We came close with Coca-Cola, but ultimately they decided the venture was too risky. The second option was a guarantor, someone with a solid credit rating to whom a bank would lend $9 million. Henry Siegel said Baywatch was going to get a slam dunk 5.0 rating. With a 5.0 rating, advertisers would pay plenty of money to have their commercial appear on Baywatch. We could recoup the cost of production and have a modest profit left over. At a 4.0 rating, we would break even. But suppose the show flopped. Who would guarantee to the bank that their loan would be repaid? A guarantor.